Another example, a visitor approaches reception where there is a clear sign indicating the provision of a PEEP system. The visitor has a visual impairment and therefore requires information about the escape routes. The building operates a policy of the meeting organiser being responsible for visitors if an escape is necessary. In other words, whoever organises the meeting is responsible for assisting any visitors. The receptionist explains the process for obtaining support. The visually impaired person makes the meeting organiser aware of the need for assistance. All staff are trained in disability escape etiquette, and prior to the start of the meeting, he or she points out the escape routes and offers to assist if necessary. Do you understand? The meeting organiser can pass that information across, and that's how the hotel creates that policy. Another example, a museum is required to evacuate due to an alert in one of the galleries. Now, there are a number of wheelchair users present. The museum has a high standard of compartmentation due to protecting the exhibits, so they've got very good compartmentation. This is an advantage in an escape situation, and staff members have been trained to understand the safety implications of this fire safety feature. Now, the communication process set up as part of the escape tells them where the alarm has been raised. They can then direct them to other areas or away from the alarm point as part of the building. In other words, you send them to another compartment. You might decide that you've got a building with good compartmentation, is one compartment is like a refuge for the other, and that's what initially they may do. Send them to another compartment. The staff are fully aware that that area is protected. However, they do need to consider ultimately getting people out, but it's a temporary place. What do you think of this sign here? Look at that sign. Differently available park. What does that mean? What does that mean? Now, the next area I'm going to look at is the communications process. Now, good communication and appropriate training for staff and management regarding the fire or emergency evacuation process are vital to ensure success. It is important, therefore, that staff and managers fully understand the evacuation plan and the fire safety strategy for the building so that they can render maximum assistance to a disabled person irrespective of the nature of their impairment. So the communication process. Provision of a fully integrated PEEP system, remember I said before, PEEP, Personal Emergency Evacuation Plan, will improve safety for everyone using the building whilst identifying any weaknesses in any existing evacuation plans. In other words, the evacuation plan may seem okay until you start work there. We've got no provision here for people in a wheelchair, for example. Now, all staff involved in the process of providing evacuation plans should have a good standard of equality awareness and disability awareness to ensure that they do not inadvertently, in other words, they don't inadvertently discriminate against disabled people. When they're doing them, they've got to make sure they consider all the different impairments. Additional training provided will depend on the role of each individual, but they may include the following areas. You've got disability awareness, you've got disability evacuation etiquette, moving, lifting and handling techniques, good practice in communication, including use of your communication systems, your appreciation of your fire-resistant enclosures, in other words, where all your compartmentation is, and the importance of using pre-planned routes. Now, staff have a vital role communicating the evacuation plan to disabled visitors, and the attitude and awareness of the staff is important. Yeah? Information should also be provided within the staff handbooks. So the staff should have in the handbooks about this issue of disabled access and egress. All staff using a building should be aware of the fire safety measures and the strategy. For example, if the building has got this compartmentation to allow horizontal evacuation, like in care homes, or hospitals, they have progressive horizontal evacuation. They should understand this. Staff involved should also fully understand their role, including what their function is, what their role. They should feel confident in their skills, and disabled people should feel that they can actually trust the process. Now, where staff members have these specific roles, it's important if they leave or they're absent that their role is allocated to somebody else. So keep an eye, you've got these procedures in place. People keep moving, they keep leaving. Make sure someone takes over that role or responsibility, even in the short term, in their absence. Now, system and equipment used for evacuation, such as pagers, will need regular checks or testing. Have you recorded all this? You've got all these systems in place. Are they looked after? Are the batteries charged? Now let's look at individual plans. An individual plan is a plan for employees and regular users of a building, such as your residents, your contractors or students who require special provision. These are individual plans. Now this is written by the management on a case-by-case basis in conjunction with the individual concerned, and it's tailored to their individual needs, and it includes detailed information of their movements during evacuation. They need to know what to do. Now, it may be necessary to provide a plan for each building and room that they might visit. Now, once this has been agreed, a copy should be kept by the disabled person concerned, the duty holder and any other person who needs to know the content of that plan. For example, your fire marshals might need to know that. Now, they're individual plans. What about standard plans? There's a difference in the way that an evacuation plan is provided, where the person requiring the assistance is a visitor to the building or an infrequent customer using a service as opposed to staff members. Now, these are standard plans, and we sometimes call these JEEPs, Generic Emergency Evacuation Plans. It's more difficult to organise an evacuation plan for people who are casually visiting the building or using a service on a one-off basis. However, by assessing the difficulty in evacuating your premises and the types of evacuation that can be provided within the building, it will be easier to address their needs. Where it's not possible to provide a bespoke plan for each person, a system of standard plans may be used. In other words, you've got a system for a person in a wheelchair. You've got a system that turns up who's got a visual impairment. It's called a standard plan. And then try and tailor it. If you know the person arrives, then discuss it. But you need the standard plan. Now, these are written procedures that can be used as options for disabled persons to choose from. Now, copies of the plan should be held at reception points within the building and should be advertised or offered to people as part of the entry or reception procedure. You might put a sign up saying, we do offer a PEEP system, please let us know. A disabled person requiring assisted evacuation is offered options for their assistance and given suitable instructions. Now, where standard PEEPs are used, local people organisations may be a source of information to assist in creating these plans, particularly for disabilities such as dual sensory impairment and autism spectrum disorders. So special organisations may assist you in doing these. Now, what are the evacuation options for people with disabilities? Now, there are a number of ways to evacuate disabled people in a fire. However, in practice, persons must be considered on an individual basis as individual people with individual needs. Don't just blanket. Now, these options can be matched to the information about the building, the fire safety measures and fire safety strategy to assist with the production of what we're covering, the JEEPs and PEEPs. A person may require different options for different buildings. For example, a visually impaired person may find it easy to get out of a building that's got good orientation standards and is uncomplicated. However, in a complex building that's got poor signage, they might need assistance. Do you understand? Now, the options are not mutually exclusive. A disabled person may use a combination of these options. Now, assumptions should not be made about what each option suits, what type of people, and it shouldn't say it suits all. Managers should be prepared to discuss with disabled people what options there are and what provision they can make. And this comes under consultation. Once a person responsible for preparing an individual plan has contacted the disabled person, an interview should be organised to establish suitable evacuation procedures. And disabled people need to be consulted about their evacuation plan. They should be given information about the fire safety measures and building systems and their options. And they should also give them ask their opinions. And their experiences should be sought. And, big thing here, have respect for that person. Have respect. It is essential that disabled persons are asked relevant questions and in a way that produces the best evacuation plan. A suitable plan should be negotiated, taking into consideration the building, management and disabled person, what they can offer. Another thing, the person working with a disabled person to write the plan should not make assumptions about the abilities of the disabled person. So don't assume because in a wheelchair they can't get out. They might be able to, it might be painful to walk. So don't assume that everyone in a wheelchair can't walk. You need to discuss this. It should not be automatically assumed that a disabled person cannot leave the premises independently, because some can, but like I say, they might find it painful to do so if they have to do a walk for a long time. So don't assume. Most disabled persons are likely to have a very clear idea of what it will take to get them out of the building. In some instances, the person will be able to facilitate their own evacuation, especially if suitable aids and adaptations are provided. So you can ask them. Different buildings may have different levels of adaptation, and a disabled person may use different methods of evacuating in different buildings. Now, disabled people are expected to assist the planning process by giving the information required for their own safe evacuation. So you're asking them for information, they should be giving you that information. You need that information to carry out this plan. Now, in order for disabled people to be willing to volunteer the information, managers should recognise their dignity and their right to independent egress and provide as much information as possible to everyone about the plans for the disabled person. So consultation comes into this. This will encourage disabled people to be more frank in their approach, and they will contribute to the establishment of their own evacuation plan. Now, disabled people may have assurances that if they volunteer what they might do in an emergency, this will not constitute grounds for removal at other times. In other words, this is what we're going to do in an emergency, but we're not going to do this every time the alarm goes off if it's a false alarm. We'll only do this should the need require it in an emergency. So your negotiation skills, your sensitivity and discernment are required when producing these PEEPs. Now, where a disabled person can make their own evacuation, it might take them longer than for non-disabled people to get out of the building. And they should be given the opportunity to take the safest route, which offers them the longest period of safety. So consider that. They can get out, but it might take them longer. This may be through an adjacent fire compartment, which has a fire resistance rating. In other words, normally, you get out by the quickest route. The quickest and safest route. But if there's a compartment here, you might say, well, actually that person, if there's a fire in this area, we'll let you go out through that particular compartment because it's got fire resistance and it'll give you more time to make your escape. More time. Now, estimating the approximate time required to achieve this will contribute to the planning process. In other words, try and establish how long is it going to take that person out. However, a fire situation may render a particular escape route unusable, and where there's more than one escape route, don't forget you've got to consider how long it's going to take them to get out of both of these. Now, employers are responsible for ensuring that employees are provided with these plans, and the disabled staff should be offered a suitable evacuation plan during their induction. That's the key thing, during induction. Don't let them work there for 3 months and then give them one. Or where there is a change of circumstances to the person's ability. In other words, they might get pregnant. Yeah, when they're fully pregnant, they may not be able to move as like they did. So, on induction or when something changes immediately, then you do your PEEP. Now, in education establishments, disabled children or students should be provided with a plan if they need one as part of their enrolment. So they're covered on the enrolment. Now, is that common? Do you think that's common? People parking where they shouldn't park? What do you think? The next thing I'm going to look at is assisted evacuation. Some people will need assistance to evacuate, and they should be given the options available to them. And if they are going to do this, they should have a pre-arranged meeting place where they're going to meet. If the disabled person is likely to move around the building, then a communication process will be necessary between the assistant and the disabled person so that they can arrange to meet a particular place. In other words, they're moving around the building. So you've got to be careful of that. What about with ramp access? Be careful when installing ramps on pavements, for example. Firstly, remember you need planning permission to do it, so you can't just put a ramp out. And be careful not to create a trip hazard on the pavement, for example, for someone who's blind. Yeah, so you've got to be careful by doing one thing by giving access, so be very careful when you're doing that. Also, it causes issue for people with prams that can't get up there and they might have to go on the road, so don't do it without due consideration when you're giving access. Like this one here, this is a good example of how you can get ramp access. What about coordination then? A coordinating role is necessary in order to ensure that any plans provided are understood throughout the whole organisation, and the nomination of a disability contact for each premises is appropriate. Different members of the organisation may be responsible for ensuring that there is provision and maintenance of evacuation plans for disabled people using this service and then report back to the coordinator. In addition, a system is required to ensure regular review and update of plans. So it's not a one-off exercise, you've got to review and update them. Line managers should take responsibilities for ensuring that the PEEPs for the staff are kept up to date. As something changes, you update the PEEP. Disabled people should be advised to tell the person of any changes to their circumstances. So you've got to let people know. Plans for each building and their occupants need to be coordinated. We know that. This is essentially important where there is the potential for a number of people to be evacuated to ensure that there is no conflict. Again, multi-occupancy buildings, where there could be a conflict, you've got to liaise with each other. Should you practice your evacuations? We've said earlier there's a conflict on this, but you've got to be careful. In order that the plans have run smoothly, training should be provided. Evacuation practices will depend on the type of evacuation. Generally, it should be done on a 6-monthly basis. That's just good guidance, regardless of the frequency of fire drills in the premises. However, all of the people involved in the evacuation plan should take part. However, there will be exceptions. It may be more appropriate to simulate carry down so as to avoid unnecessary injury to the disabled person. So simulate, what would you do? Where a disabled person has elected to make an exceptional effort to get out, don't forget they might do it when there's a fire. They don't want to do it during a fire drill, so you shouldn't make them. Some building adaptations may facilitate evacuation and reduce the need for a personal assistance. So you might have an evacuation list, for example. Fire safety measures such as fire compartmentation, suppression systems, because don't forget, if a building is fully sprinklered, the Chief Fire Officers Association actually says that that might be used as a compartment for basically as a refuge. So look at your building structure and think, do we actually need to evacuate certain people? Where can we hold them as a temporary place for safety? Lifts. Should you use a lift in a fire? No. Why not? In case it breaks down. Make sure on all floors you've got a sign. I said that at one place at a care home. Make sure you put a sign every floor saying, do not use lift in case of fire. The manager said to me, no, I don't. There's a sign inside the lift. They're in. They're pushing buttons. Every floor, do not use lift.